Chapter 1. Decide that quitting is no longer an option. The illusion of choice. We live in an age of options. We are told from a young age that flexibility is a virtue, that having a plan B is the mark of a prepared mind, and that we should always keep our doors open. In many areas of life, investing, career paths, or travel, this is sound advice. But in the realm of the human spirit and the pursuit of impossible goals, options are a toxin. Options are the cracks in the dam through which your power leaks. Most people approach their goals with a hidden caveat. They say, "I'm going to build this business unless I lose too much money." They say, "I'm going to get into the best shape of my life unless work gets too stressful." They say, "I will stay committed to this path unless it starts to hurt more than I expected." The moment you attach an "unless" to your commitment, you have already quit. You just haven't realized it yet. You have left the door cracked open, and when the wind of adversity blows, and it always does, that door will swing wide and you will walk through it. To become unbreakable, the first step is a psychological surgery. You must surgically remove the option to quit. You must move from a state of trying to a state of identity. Identity versus motivation. Motivation is a feeling. It is a chemical surge of dopamine and adrenaline that makes you feel like you can conquer the world. But feelings are fickle. They are affected by the weather, the amount of sleep you got last night, and the last meal you ate. If your endurance is fueled by motivation, your endurance will vanish the moment you feel tired, hungry, or discouraged. Identity, however, is a fact. Think about a non-smoker. If you offer a cigarette to someone who is trying to quit, they have to use willpower. Their internal dialogue is a battle. "I want it, but I shouldn't. I'm trying to be healthy." They are negotiating. But if you offer a cigarette to a person who has never smoked and has no interest in it, they don't use willpower. They don't negotiate. They simply say, "I'm not a smoker." The option to smoke doesn't even register in their brain as a possibility. It isn't part of their identity. The person who never breaks has reached this same level of identity regarding their perseverance. They don't try to keep going. They are the person who keeps going. By removing the "should I quit" debate from their internal monologue, they save massive amounts of cognitive energy. When you are in the middle of a crisis, whether it's the 20th mile of a marathon, a failing product launch, or a personal tragedy, your brain is looking for ways to save energy. If quitting is an option on the table, your brain will spend 50% of its energy debating whether to take that exit. But if quitting is psychologically unavailable, if it has been deleted from the menu, your brain is forced to divert 100% of its energy into finding a way forward. When quitting is gone, power appears. Burning the boats. There is a famous historical anecdote often attributed to the explorer Hernan Cortés. Upon arriving on the shores of the Aztec Empire with a small, outmatched force, he realized his men were afraid. They were looking back at the ships, thinking about their families, thinking about the safety of home. They were only half committed to the battle ahead because the option of retreat was sitting right there in the harbor. Cortés gave a simple, terrifying command: burn the ships. As the men watched the smoke rise from their only way home, a profound psychological shift occurred. The fear didn't vanish, but the nature of the fear changed. It was no longer the fear of should we stay or should we go. It became the absolute necessity of we must win or we die. They became unbreakable because retreat was no longer a physical or psychological reality. We see this same phenomenon in elite special forces training, such as the Navy SEALs Hell Week. The instructors aren't just looking for the strongest or fastest candidates. They are looking for the ones who have burned their ships. The candidates who fail are often the ones who are thinking about the warm shower, the soft bed, and the bell they can ring at any time to make the pain stop. The ones who succeed are the ones who have decided that they will either graduate or they will be carried off the field unconscious. They have removed the exit. The anatomy of the decision. Deciding that quitting is no longer an option isn't something you do once. It's a standard you live by. It is the realization that the struggle is not an obstacle to the path, it is the path. When a founder is facing bankruptcy, the average mind starts looking for a job. The unbreakable mind starts looking for a new pivot, a new investor, or a new way to cut costs. Why? Because the job option was removed years ago. When an athlete feels their muscles seizing, the average mind starts looking for a reason to slow down. The unbreakable mind starts looking for a new breathing technique or a way to shorten their stride to keep moving. This is the biological law of the wall. When the mind perceives a wall, it tries to protect the body by slowing it down. But when the mind realizes the wall isn't an exit, it unlocks reserved tanks of energy that the average person never accesses. This is why mothers can lift cars off their children. In that moment, giving up is not an option. Because quitting is gone, the power to lift a 2-ton vehicle appears. Practical application. The zero option protocol. How do you implement this today? You start by identifying the plan B thoughts that are currently draining your energy. What is the goal you are currently pursuing? Now, ask yourself, what is the condition under which I would stop? If your answer is if I get too tired, if I lose X amount of money, or if people laugh at me, you have found your leak. You must take that condition and burn it. You must make a cold decision. A cold decision is a decision made when you are calm and rational, which dictates your behavior when you are emotional and under pressure. Write it down. I will pursue this goal until it is accomplished or until I am physically incapable of continuing. There is no middle ground. There is no trying. There is only the finish line. Once that decision is made, you no longer have to decide anything when things get hard. The decision was already made in the past. When the pain arrives, you don't ask, is this worth it? You simply remind yourself, I don't have the option to stop. The freedom of the prison. Paradoxically, removing the option to quit is the most liberating thing you can do. There is a deep, exhausting anxiety that comes from constant negotiation with yourself. Should I work out today? Should I stay in this relationship? Should I keep going with this project? This decision fatigue wears you down more than the work itself. When you remove the option to quit, you enter a productive prison. In this prison, there is only one direction, forward. There is a strange peace that comes when you realize that you are trapped on the path to your dreams. You no longer have to worry about the what ifs. You only have to worry about the how. As you move through the chapters of this book, keep this first principle at the core of your being. Every other technique, managing pain, building standards, eliminating self-negotiation, relies on this foundation. None of those tools will work if you are still looking for the exit sign. Look at your goals. Look at your life. Locate the ships you've kept anchored in the harbor just in case. It's time to light the match. When quitting is gone, power appears. Chapter 2. Train your mind to interpret pain as progress, the biological trap. From the moment you were born, your brain has had one primary objective: to keep you alive. To your primitive brain, anything that causes discomfort is classified as a threat. When your muscles burn, your brain interprets it as potential tissue damage. When you face social rejection, your brain interprets it as being cast out of the tribe, which in the wild meant certain death. This is the biological trap. Your brain is wired to seek comfort because, for thousands of years, comfort meant safety. But in the modern world, comfort is the graveyard of potential. To become someone who never breaks, you must perform a radical act of cognitive re-engineering. You must take the very thing your brain fears most, pain, and turn it into a signal for advancement. The average person views pain as a stop sign. They hit a wall of exhaustion, or they face a humiliating professional setback, and they interpret that sensation as a command. Stop. Go back to safety. You've gone too far. The unbreakable mindset operates on a different frequency. To them, pain is not a stop sign. It is a green light. It is the confirmation that they have finally left the territory of the average and have entered the territory of the elite. Pain is information, not a command. The reframing of discomfort. Think about the last time you were truly pushed to your limit. Perhaps it was a grueling physical workout, a high-stakes presentation where you were being grilled by superiors, or a period of your life where you were working 20-hour days to keep a dream alive. In those moments, your body sends out distress signals. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing becomes shallow, and a voice in the back of your mind begins to scream for relief. Most people listen to that voice. They pull back. They moderate their effort. But the elite have learned to relabel these sensations. They don't call it suffering. They call it evidence. When an ultramarathoner enters the pain cave at mile 70, they don't think, my legs are dying. They think, the weakness is leaving my body. This burning is the sensation of my endurance expanding. They have decoupled the physical sensation from the negative emotion. They look at the pain with a sense of clinical curiosity. They say to themselves, there it is. There is the resistance I was looking for. Now the real work begins. If you are not feeling some level of discomfort in your pursuit, you are not growing. Growth is, by definition, an intrusive process. It requires the breaking down of old structures to make room for the new. If you want a bigger muscle, you must create microscopic tears in the fiber. If you want a bigger life, you must create tears in your comfort zone. The alchemy of career setbacks. This reframing isn't just for athletes. It is the secret weapon of the world's most resilient founders and leaders. Consider the startup death valley, that period where the initial excitement has worn off, the funding is low, and the product is failing to gain traction. To the average founder, this pain is a sign that the idea is bad and they should quit. They interpret the struggle as proof of inadequacy. But the unbreakable founder sees this pain as leverage. They know that the difficulty of this phase is exactly what creates the moat around their future success. If it were easy, everyone would do it. The pain is the barrier to entry that keeps your competitors out. Every time you solve a problem that makes you want to quit, you are gaining a piece of information that your competitors don't have. When you lose a major client or suffer a public failure, your instinct is to hide. Your brain tells you that you are damaged. You must reject this. Instead, you must interpret that failure as a high-intensity training session. You have just been given a stress test. You now know exactly where your systems are weak. You now know exactly what you can survive. Public failure is the ultimate forge. Once you have been humiliated and realized that you are still standing, that the world didn't end and you didn't die, you become dangerous. You are no longer held hostage by the fear of what people think. You have turned the pain of failure into the power of invulnerability. Pain is information, not a command. Distinguishing intensity from injury. To master this mindset, you must learn the art of the scan. You must be able to distinguish between two very different types of pain, intensity pain and injury pain. Injury pain is your body or your life telling you that something is structurally wrong. It is the sharp snap in a ligament. It is the ethical violation that will destroy your reputation. It is the burnout that is leading to a clinical breakdown. You must listen to injury pain. It requires a pivot. Intensity pain, however, is merely the cost of admission. It is the dull ache of hard work. It is the heat of a high-pressure environment. It is the anxiety of doing something you've never done before. The mistake most people make is that they treat intensity pain as if it were an injury. They feel a little bit of stress and they treat it like a catastrophe. They feel a little bit of fatigue and they treat it like a medical emergency. The unbreakable mindset trains itself to ignore the static of intensity. When you feel the heat rising, you don't run from the kitchen. You settle into it. You realize that the heat is what is cooking the meal. Without the heat, everything remains raw and useless. Using pain as a GPS. If you are lost in your life or your career, look for the pain. Usually, the thing you are most afraid of doing, the conversation you are avoiding, the project you are procrastinating on, the physical challenge you are dodging, is exactly where the progress is hidden. Pain is a GPS. It points directly to the area of your life that needs the most attention. If the thought of public speaking makes your stomach turn, that is the GPS telling you that your communication skills are where your next breakthrough lies. If the thought of looking at your bank account causes you pain, that is the GPS telling you that your financial discipline is the bottleneck of your life. Stop avoiding the sting. Lean into it. When you feel that familiar internal resistance, say to yourself, this is the way. The daily dose. Unbreakability is a muscle, and muscles require progressive overload. You cannot expect to handle a massive life tragedy with grace if you cannot handle a cold shower or a difficult workout. You must seek out small, controlled doses of discomfort every single day. You must train your brain to recognize the sensation of "I don't want to do this" and respond with "That's exactly why I'm doing it." By the time the real storms of life arrive, the layoffs, the health scares, the losses, your brain will be so conditioned to seeing pain as a precursor to progress that it won't panic. It will simply go into problem-solving mode. It will see the pain, acknowledge the information, and then proceed with the mission. The world will try to break you. It will throw obstacles in your path that are designed to hurt. Your job is not to avoid the hurt, but to change what the hurt means. You are a scientist in the laboratory of your own life, and pain is just another data point. When the world screams at you to stop, when your body begs you to quit, and when your ego is bruised and blooded, you must remember the mantra that separates the leaders from the led. Pain is information, not a command. Chapter 3. Build standards higher than your feelings. The myth of the right mood. The world is obsessed with the idea of being in the zone. We are told that to do great work, we must find our passion, wait for inspiration to strike, or manifest a high vibrational state of mind. We wait for the right mood to hit the gym, the right energy to have a difficult conversation, or the right spark to start our creative projects. This is the hallmark of the amateur. If you only move when you feel like moving, you are a slave to your neurochemistry. You are a leaf in the wind, tossed about by the fluctuating levels of serotonin, dopamine, and cortisol in your bloodstream. The person who never breaks has realized a fundamental truth. Feelings are the most unreliable narrators in your life. Your feelings don't care about your long-term goals. Your feelings don't care about your family's future or your legacy. Your feelings care about one thing: immediate comfort. Feelings want the donut, not the discipline. Feelings want the snooze button, not the sunrise. Feelings want to hide from the criticism, not stand in the arena. To become unbreakable, you must move beyond the mood-based life and enter the standard-based life. You must build a structure of behavior that is so sturdy that your emotions can scream at the top of their lungs and the structure won't even vibrate. Standards stay. Feelings fade. What is a standard? Most people have goals. A goal is a target in the distance, something you hope to achieve. But goals are fragile. When you feel tired or discouraged, the goal feels too far away, and you give yourself permission to slack off. A standard, however, is a floor. It is the minimum level of performance that you are willing to accept from yourself, regardless of the circumstances. Think of a world-class restaurant. Their standard is that every plate leaving the kitchen must be perfect. It doesn't matter if the head chef had a fight with his spouse that morning. It doesn't matter if the sous chef is exhausted. It doesn't matter if the kitchen is sweltering and the staff is grumpy. The standard remains the same. The customer doesn't pay for the chef's feelings, they pay for the chef's standards. In your own life, you must become the head chef of your destiny. You must decide on your non-negotiables. A standard sounds like this: I do not miss a workout, even if I only have 10 minutes. I do not speak out of anger to my partner, no matter how frustrated I feel. I produce my daily output before I check my email, regardless of how tired I am. When you raise your standards higher than your feelings, you stop being a victim of your internal weather. You become a professional. The kill zone, where willpower fails. In high-pressure environments, combat, emergency medicine, high-stakes trading, there is a concept known as the kill zone. This is the moment of maximum stress where the human body's fight or flight response takes over. In the kill zone, your fine motor skills deteriorate, your peripheral vision narrows, and your logical brain shuts down. If a soldier relied on willpower or positive feelings in the kill zone, they would freeze. Instead, they rely on drill and ceremony. They rely on standards that have been drilled into their nervous system through thousands of repetitions. They don't feel like reloading their weapon. They reload it because it is the standard procedure. You are in a kill zone every time you face a major life setback or a period of intense exhaustion. In those moments, your willpower is gone. It has been drained by the stress of the situation. If you haven't built standards that outperform your willpower, you will break. Resilient people use routines as a form of externalized willpower. They don't ask, "Do I want to do this?" They simply follow the protocol. The routine is the rail that keeps the train on the tracks when the engine is screaming. Case study: the surgeon and the checklist. Consider a trauma surgeon. They see more tragedy and pressure in a week than most people see in a lifetime. If they allowed their feelings, the sadness for a patient, the fatigue of a 24-hour shift, the irritation with a colleague, to dictate their performance, people would die. Instead, they use checklists. They use sterile procedures. They use the scrub. These are standards of behavior that create a barrier between the person's internal state and their external performance. By the time they pick up the scalpel, their feelings have been sidelined by their standards. You must create your own checklists for your life. When you are feeling depressed, what is the checklist? When you are feeling overwhelmed, what is the standard? By deciding your actions before the emotions arrive, you take the power away from the emotion. Standards stay. Feelings fade. The floor versus the ceiling. The average person focuses on their ceiling, the best they can do on their best day. They think, when I'm motivated, I can work 12 hours straight. The unbreakable person focuses on their floor, the best they can do on their worst day. Your life is not defined by what you do when the sun is shining and you have a pocket full of money. Your life is defined by what you do when you are sick, heartbroken, and broke. If your floor is high, you are dangerous. If your standard on your worst day is to still show up, still be kind, and still do the work, you are effectively impossible to stop. Think about the minimum effective dose. On a day when everything goes wrong, what is the bare minimum you will do to maintain your integrity? Maybe you can't do a 2-hour gym session, but your standard says you will do 50 push-ups. Maybe you can't write a whole chapter, but your standard says you will write 200 words. By maintaining the standard, you keep the momentum alive. You prove to your subconscious that your commitments are more powerful than your complaints. The emotional tax. Every time you negotiate with your feelings, you pay an emotional tax. Feeling, I'm too tired to work out. Maybe I'll just go tomorrow. Feeling, yeah, and let's watch a movie instead. This negotiation is exhausting. It creates a state of internal conflict that drains your energy. But when you have a standard, the negotiation is over before it begins. Feeling, I'm too tired. Standard, we work out at 5 p.m. End of discussion. By adhering to the standard, you actually save energy. You stop the internal tug-of-war. You might feel tired while you're doing the work, but you won't feel the soul-crushing guilt that comes from breaking a promise to yourself. Practical application. Defining your constitution. To live this chapter, you must write your own personal constitution. These are the 5 to 10 standards that define who you are, regardless of how you feel. Identify your leaky points. Where do your feelings usually win? E.g., hitting snooze, eating junk food, avoiding hard work. Set a floor for each. What is the non-negotiable minimum behavior in that area? The if-then rule. Create a standard for when feelings attack. If I feel like quitting, I will do 10 more minutes of work. Remember, the goal is not to stop having feelings. You are human. You will always feel fear, laziness, and sadness. The goal is to make those feelings irrelevant to your output. When you look in the mirror, you want to see a person who can be trusted. Not a person who can be trusted as long as they feel good, but a person who can be trusted to uphold the standard when the world is falling apart. The wind will blow. The rain will fall. Your mood will darken. But the house you built on the foundation of standards will still be standing when the clouds clear. Standards stay. Feelings fade. Chapter 4. Eliminate the habit of self-negotiation. The internal courtroom. Every single morning, a trial begins inside your head. The sun hasn't even fully cleared the horizon, and the prosecution and the defense are already arguing their case. The alarm goes off. The executive self, the version of you that set the alarm the night before with high intentions, stands up and says, "It is time to work. We have a mountain to climb." But immediately, the lower self, the part of you that is governed by biological comfort and immediate gratification, stands up to cross-examine. It says, "We didn't sleep well. The room is cold. We worked late yesterday. If we just sleep for 20 more minutes, we will actually be more productive because we'll be better rested." It's the logical choice, really. This is the habit of self-negotiation. It is a silent, invisible drain on your mental toughness. Most people think their problem is a lack of willpower. It isn't. Their problem is that they allow the courtroom to remain in session. They allow the debate to happen. The person who never breaks has realized that the courtroom is a trap. They have learned that you cannot negotiate with the part of your brain that wants you to stay small. You don't argue with a toddler about whether or not to eat vegetables, and you don't argue with your primitive brain about whether or not to fulfill your potential. To be unbreakable, you must abolish the internal courtroom. No debate. Just execution. The just this once trap. The most dangerous phrase in the human language is just this once. It sounds innocent. It sounds like flexibility or self-compassion. But in the architecture of the mind, just this once is a structural crack. When you say you will do something and then you negotiate your way out of it, even for a good reason, you are training your brain to realize that your word is not a law. You are teaching your subconscious that your commitments are actually just suggestions. Think of your discipline as a high-pressure pipe. The power of that pipe comes from the fact that it is sealed. There are no leaks. Just this once is a pinhole leak. You might think, it's just one skip. It's just one cheap meal. It's just one day of not making my sales calls. But the leak doesn't just lose you that day's progress. It drops the pressure in the entire system. Once the brain knows that a deal can be made, it will spend the rest of your life trying to make more deals. It will become an expert negotiator. It will find more creative, more logical, and more reasonable excuses to let you off the hook. If you have to decide to be disciplined every single morning, you will eventually fail. Decision fatigue is real. If you spend your mental energy debating your habits, you will have no energy left for your actual work. The elite don't negotiate. They have binary rules. A binary rule is a 1 or a 0. It is on or it is off. There is no maybe. There is no unless. By making the decision once, they never have to make it again. The negotiator is a terrorist. In international diplomacy, there is a famous policy: we do not negotiate with terrorists. Why? Because if you give a terrorist what they want, you don't buy peace. You only prove that terrorism works. You invite more attacks. Your lower self, the part of you that wants to quit, hide, and settle for less, is a psychological terrorist. It is holding your future self hostage in exchange for immediate comfort. If you negotiate with that part of yourself, if you say, okay, I'll sleep in today, but I'll work twice as hard tomorrow, you have just proven to your lower self that terrorism works. You have rewarded the impulse to quit. And because you rewarded it, that impulse will come back stronger, louder, and more logical tomorrow. Unbreakable people have a zero negotiation policy. When the impulse to slack off arises, they don't argue with it. They don't try to convince themselves to work. They simply recognize the impulse as a bad faith actor and shut the door. They move their body before their mind has a chance to formulate an argument. No debate. Just execution. The strength of the Standard Operating Procedure, SOP. High-performance organizations, from NASA to the Navy SEALs, rely on standard operating procedures. An SOP is a set of step-by-step instructions compiled by an organization to help workers carry out complex routine operations. The beauty of an SOP is that it removes the need for thought in moments of high stress. When a pilot experiences an engine failure, they don't sit there and negotiate with themselves about what to do first. They don't think, well, I'm feeling a bit stressed, maybe I'll skip step 3. They execute the SOP. To become unbreakable, you must turn your life into a series of personal SOPs. The morning SOP: wake up, drink water, move, work. No thinking involved. The crisis SOP: when a project fails, analyze the data, pivot the strategy, inform the team. No emotional negotiation involved. The health SOP: eat this, don't eat that. No, just this once allowed. When you live by SOPs, you aren't trying to be disciplined. You are simply following the manual. You have outsourced your discipline to a system, which is far more reliable than your mood. Case study: the elite athlete's cold decision. Consider an Olympic swimmer. They have to get into a cold pool at 4:30 a.m., 365 days a year. If they had to decide to do that every morning, they would miss half their sessions. The water is too cold, the bed is too warm, and the body is too sore. Instead, they make a cold decision. A cold decision is a decision made when you are in a rational, high-functioning state that governs what you will do when you are in a biological, low-functioning state. The swimmer made the decision to be an Olympian 4 years ago. That one macro decision rendered all the micro decisions irrelevant. When the alarm goes off at 4:30 a.m., there is no micro decision to be made. The decision was made years ago. The feet hit the floor because the contract has already been signed. You must identify the macro decisions in your life. What have you already decided to be? If you have decided to be a healthy person, the decision of whether to eat the junk food in the break room has already been made. If you have decided to be a top-tier performer, the decision of whether to send that last email when you're tired has already been made. Stop redeciding what you've already decided. The identity of the non-negotiator. There is a profound psychological power in being the person who just doesn't do certain things. In a study on habit formation, researchers found a significant difference between people who said "I can't eat that" and people who said "I don't eat that." The "I can't" group was constantly negotiating. They felt like they were being deprived, and eventually, they gave in. The "I don't" group, however, had shifted their identity. There was no negotiation because "I don't" is a statement of fact. You must move from "I'm trying not to negotiate with myself" to "I am the type of person who does what they say they will do." When you become a non-negotiator, you gain a level of self-trust that is unbreakable. Most people's anxiety comes from the fact that they cannot trust themselves. They know, deep down, that if things get hard, they will make a deal with themselves to quit. But when you eliminate self-negotiation, you develop internal integrity. You know that if you say you're going to do something, it is as good as done. This creates a terrifying level of confidence. When you know you won't quit, you aren't afraid of any challenge the world throws at you. Practical application. The 24-hour no-negotiation fast. To break the habit of self-bargaining, you must practice. For the next 24 hours, implement the zero negotiation protocol. Set 3 specific tasks for tomorrow. They can be small, e.g., making the bed, 10 minutes of reading, no sugar. Declare them as sovereign law. Tell yourself that these 3 things are non-negotiable. Monitor the voice. When the time comes to do the task, listen to your brain try to negotiate. It will say, "We can do it later," or "It's not that important." Execute immediately. Do not answer the voice. Do not argue. Do not give it a platform. Simply move your hands and feet. Over time, that negotiating voice will get quieter. It will realize that you are a bad listener. It will realize that no matter how much it complains, the work still gets done. Eventually, the voice will stop altogether. You will reach a state of automaticity. You will see a mountain, and you will start climbing. You will see a task, and you will finish it. There will be no internal friction. There will be no wasted energy. There will only be the objective and the execution. The world is full of people who are thinking about it, planning on it, and negotiating for it. You are not one of them. You have burned the courtroom. You have fired the lawyers. You are the person who executes. No debate. Just execution. Chapter 5. Make discipline your default setting. The architecture of the automatic. We have been taught to view discipline as a high-octane fuel, something we must summon, like a warrior drawing a sword, every time we face a challenge. We imagine the disciplined person as someone who is constantly at war with themselves, grit-toothed and white-knuckled, forcing their body to do what their mind demands. But if you look at the most unbreakable people in history, the monks who meditate for hours, the writers who produce a book every year for decades, the athletes who never miss a session, you will see something much more profound. They aren't in a state of constant war. They are in a state of flow. For them, discipline isn't an act of will, it is a default setting. Discipline, in its highest form, is not about trying harder. It is about removing the need to try at all. To become unbreakable, you must move discipline from your conscious mind, which is slow, easily tired, and prone to distraction, into your subconscious mind. You must move it from the prefrontal cortex to the basal ganglia. You must stop making discipline a choice and start making it a reflex. What you repeat, you become. The myth of the grind. The grind is a popular concept in our culture, but it is a dangerous one. It implies that success is a matter of sheer, painful endurance. While endurance is necessary, relying on the grind alone is like trying to drive a car with the parking brake on. You can do it, but you will burn out the engine. The elite don't grind in the way amateurs do. Instead, they design a path of least resistance toward their goals. They realize that willpower is a finite resource, a battery that drains every time you make a decision. If you have to use willpower to get out of bed, willpower to avoid the donuts in the kitchen, and willpower to sit down at your desk, by the time you actually start your work, your battery is dead. The unbreakable person doesn't rely on the battery. They plug themselves into the grid. They use environment design. If you want to be disciplined, you must stop trying to change your mind and start changing your surroundings. If you want to wake up early, don't just resolve to do it. Put your alarm clock in the hallway so you have to walk 20 feet to turn it off. If you want to eat healthy, don't try to have self-control. Remove the junk food from your house entirely. When you remove the friction between you and the right behavior, and you add friction between you and the wrong behavior, discipline becomes your default. You aren't being strong. You are simply following the path the environment has laid out for you. Case study: the power of friction. Consider the story of a world-renowned violinist. For years, she struggled with the discipline of daily practice. She would come home from rehearsals exhausted, see her violin case in the corner, and find 1,000 excuses not to open it. She felt like a failure because she lacked the will to practice. Then, she made one small change. She bought a high-quality violin stand and placed it in the center of her living room. She took the violin out of the case and left it there, ready to be played. The result? Her practice time tripled. Why? Because she had removed the friction of opening the case. The 3 seconds it took to unzip the bag and assemble the bow were the barrier that her tired brain couldn't cross. By making the violin the default state of the room, playing it became the path of least resistance. Unbreakable people are masters of this friction mapping. They analyze their day and identify the 20-second barriers that are stopping them from being great. They realize that they aren't lazy, they are just being defeated by small amounts of friction. What you repeat, you become. The law of repetition. There is a biological reason why what you repeat, you become. It is called myelination. Every time you perform an action, whether it's swinging a golf club, typing a line of code, or choosing to stay calm in a crisis, a neural circuit in your brain fires. The more often that circuit fires, the more a fatty substance called myelin wraps around those nerve fibers. Myelin is like insulation on an electrical wire. It makes the signal faster, stronger, and more automatic. The first time you try to be disciplined, the signal is weak. The wire is uninsulated. It takes massive effort to make the signal reach its destination. But after 100 repetitions, the wire is thick with myelin. The signal moves at lightning speed. This is why the first week of a new habit feels like death, but the 100th week feels like breathing. You are literally building a superhighway of discipline in your brain. The person who never breaks is someone who has myelinated their resilience. They have repeated the act of standing back up so many times that their brain doesn't even consider the alternative. Falling is a temporary state. Getting up is the hardwired response. Default settings in high-pressure environments. In the world of high-stakes aviation, pilots use memory items. These are critical procedures that must be executed so quickly in an emergency that there is no time to look at a checklist. If an engine catches fire at 30,000 feet, the pilot doesn't think about what to do. They don't weigh their options. Their hands move automatically to shut off the fuel and fire the extinguishers. This is discipline as a default setting. You must create your own life memory items. What is your default setting when you receive a hateful email? Is it to fire back a defensive response, an amateur reflex, or is it to take 3 deep breaths and wait an hour, a myelinated standard? What is your default setting when you hit a financial setback? Is it to complain and panic, or is it to immediately audit your expenses and find a new stream of income? If you haven't trained your default settings, You will revert to your lowest level of training under pressure. You won't rise to the occasion. You will sink to the level of your systems. By making discipline your default, you ensure that even when you are at your weakest, your behavior remains at its strongest. What you repeat, you become. The habit of identity. The final secret to making discipline a default is to stop viewing it as something you do and start viewing it as something you are. Amateurs say, "I'm trying to go to the gym." The unbreakable say, "I am an athlete." Amateurs say, "I am trying to write a book." The unbreakable say, "I am a writer." When discipline is tied to your identity, it requires zero effort. A vegetarian doesn't wake up every morning and say, "I hope I have the discipline to not eat meat today." They don't need discipline because eating meat is not who they are. If you want to make discipline your default, you must adopt the identity of the person you want to become before you have the results. You don't wait until you have $1 million to be disciplined with your money. You become a person who is disciplined with money, and that identity eventually produces the $1 million. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. If you want to be unbreakable, every time you choose the hard path over the easy one, you are casting a vote for that identity. Eventually, the evidence becomes overwhelming. You no longer have to try to be tough. You simply are tough. Practical application, the default reset. To turn discipline into your default setting, you must perform a system audit of your life. Identify the friction. Pick one goal you are struggling with. What is the 20-second barrier that stops you? E.g., if you don't journal, is it because your journal is hidden in a drawer? Move it to your pillow. Automate the start. Make the first 2 minutes of your most important task so easy that it's impossible to fail. Don't focus on the hour of work. Focus on the default of sitting in the chair. The never miss twice rule. Defaults are built on streaks. If you miss a day, it's an anomaly. If you miss 2, it's the start of a new, bad, default. Never miss twice. Audit your circle. Your social environment is the ultimate default. If your 5 closest friends are lazy, lazy will be your default. If they are unbreakable, unbreakable will be yours. You are a product of your repetitions. Every morning you wake up, every task you complete, and every temptation you resist is another layer of myelin on the architecture of your soul. Stop waiting for a burst of motivation. Stop waiting for the spirit to move you. Design your life so that you don't need the spirit. Design it so that excellence is simply what happens when you show up. What you repeat, you become. Chapter 6. Detach from outcomes, attach to effort. The paradox of the scoreboard. Imagine a world-class archer standing at the line. The gold medal is within reach. The crowd is silent, the cameras are zoomed in on her face, and the weight of 4 years of training is resting on this single shot. If that archer is thinking about the gold medal, she will likely miss. If she is thinking about the headlines in tomorrow's newspaper, or the endorsement deals waiting for her, or the disappointment of her coach if she fails, her muscles will tighten. Her breathing will become shallow. Her focus will fracture. By obsessing over the outcome, she has sabotaged the process required to achieve it. To hit the bullseye, she must forget the bullseye exists. She must detach her mind from the target and attach it entirely to the tension of the string, the position of her elbow, and the steady release of her breath. She must fall in love with the effort of the shot, regardless of where the arrow lands. This is the great paradox of high performance. The more you obsess over winning, the more fragile you become. The person who never breaks is the person who has learned to separate their self-worth from the scoreboard. Control the input. Let go of the scoreboard. The fragility of results-based thinking. Most people are outcome-dependent. Their happiness, their confidence, and their motivation are all tied to external results. If the business makes money, they feel like a success. If the business loses money, they feel like a failure. If the crowd cheers, they are high. If the crowd boos, they are depressed. This is a recipe for a broken spirit. Why? Because the outcome is never 100% within your control. You can have the best product in the world, but a global pandemic can shut down your industry. You can be the best prepared candidate for a job, but the hiring manager might choose their cousin instead. You can play a perfect game of poker and still lose the hand to a statistical fluke. When you attach your identity to the outcome, you are putting your mental stability in the hands of fate, luck, and the whims of other people. You become fragile. You are a house built on sand. When the tide of results goes out, your foundation crumbles. The unbreakable mindset is process dependent. It finds its stability in the input, the things that are 100% within your control, your preparation, your work ethic, your focus, and your integrity. The philosophy of the process. In the world of American football, there is a legendary coach named Nick Saban. He won more national championships than almost anyone in history. But if you walked into his locker room, you would rarely hear him talk about winning a championship. In fact, he famously banned the word championship from his players' vocabulary for long periods. Instead, he preached the process. The process is the fanatical obsession with the task at hand. It's not about winning the game on Saturday. It's about winning the next 5 minutes of practice. It's about the 4-inch step. It's about the way you tape your ankles, the way you watch film, and the intensity with which you run a single drill. Saban understood that the win is just a byproduct. It is a lagging indicator of the quality of the process. If you take care of the inputs with relentless discipline, the output takes care of itself. If you focus on the score, you lose sight of the play. But if you focus on the play, the score eventually reflects your excellence. When you detach from the outcome, you remove the performance anxiety that breaks most people. You aren't worried about the what ifs. You are too busy executing the what is. Control the input. Let go of the scoreboard. Stability in the storm. When a crisis hits, a market crash, a health diagnosis, or a sudden loss, the outcome-oriented person panics. They see their results disappearing and they feel like they are disappearing with them. They break because their why was tied to a world that just changed. The process-oriented person stays steady. They look at the chaos and ask a single question: what is the most disciplined thing I can do in the next 60 seconds? They realize that while they cannot control the storm, they can control the way they sail the ship. They find a strange, invincible peace in the middle of disaster because their success is redefined. Success is no longer winning. Success is maintaining the standard of effort despite the conditions. If you can reach the end of a day where everything went wrong, where you lost money, faced rejection, and hit roadblocks, and you can honestly say, I put in a world-class effort and followed my process, then you are a success. No one can take that from you. Not the market, not your boss, and not bad luck. You have become outcome independent. Case study: the Stoic investor. Consider 2 investors during a market crash. The first is outcome attached. He watches the red numbers on his screen and sees his retirement vanishing. He feels physical pain. He panics and sells at the bottom, locking in his losses. He breaks. The second is process attached. He has a strategy. I invest a fixed amount every month into diversified assets, and I rebalance once a year. When the crash hits, he doesn't look at his net worth. He looks at his process. His process says keep buying. He executes the plan with clinical neutrality. He doesn't feel like a genius when the market is up, and he doesn't feel like a loser when it's down. He simply controls the input. 10 years later, the second investor is wealthy, and the first is still bitter. The difference wasn't intelligence. It was the ability to detach from the fluctuating scoreboard and attach to the stable effort. The creative's trap. This principle is vital for anyone in a creative or entrepreneurial field. In the age of social media, it is easy to become addicted to metrics, the likes, the views, the sales, the applause. But metrics are a trap. If you write a book because you want to be a bestseller, you will be paralyzed by the fear that it won't happen. You will write what you think people want to hear, rather than what is true. You will be fragile. But if you write because your process is to write 500 words of truth every morning, you are invincible. If the book sells 1 million copies, great. If it sells 10, your process remains unchanged. Your pride is in the work, not the reception of the work. Ironically, this is usually how the best work is produced. By letting go of the need for the hit, you find the freedom to be great. Control the input. Let go of the scoreboard. Practical application, the effort audit. To transition from outcome-obsessed to effort-attached, you must change the way you evaluate your life. You must stop asking, "How did it go?" and start asking, "How did I show up?" Define your inputs. For every major goal, list the 3 things that are 100% in your control. E.g., if the goal is a promotion, the inputs are 1. Showing up 15 minutes early. 2. Completing all tasks with 10/10 quality. 3. Asking for feedback once a week. The post-game evaluation. At the end of the day, grade yourself only on those inputs. If you hit your inputs but the result was bad, give yourself an A+. If you got a good result but were lazy and skipped your process, give yourself a D-. The 24-hour rule: if you have a huge win, a great outcome, celebrate for 24 hours, then detach and return to the process. If you have a huge loss, grieve for 24 hours, then detach and return to the process. Language shift. Stop saying, "I need to win." Start saying, "I need to execute." When you live this way, you develop a quiet confidence. You aren't cocky because you think you'll always win. You're confident because you know that no matter what the scoreboard says, you have the discipline to keep playing. The world cannot break a person who doesn't need the world's validation to feel successful. When your win is the work itself, you have already won before the game even begins. Control the input. Let go of the scoreboard. Chapter 7. Develop emotional neutrality under pressure. The fog of war. In the heat of a crisis, the most dangerous element in the room is never the obstacle itself. It is not the falling stock price, the angry client, the sudden injury, or the chaotic battlefield. The most dangerous element is the human ego's emotional reaction to those things. When the stakes are high, the average person becomes a reactor. They are a thermometer, simply reflecting the temperature of the room. If the room is panicking, they panic. If the room is angry, they become aggressive. This emotional volatility creates what military strategists call the fog of war, a state of confusion where you can no longer see the facts because they are obscured by the smoke of your own feelings. The person who never breaks has trained themselves to be a thermostat, not a thermometer. They don't reflect the temperature, they set it. They have developed a quality known as emotional neutrality. Emotional neutrality is not the absence of emotion. You are not a robot. You will still feel the spike of fear, the sting of insult, and the surge of adrenaline. But the unbreakable person has built a firewall between what they feel and how they act. They have learned that in a storm, the person who stays steady is the only one who can stay effective. Stay steady so you can stay effective. The biological hijack. To understand why neutrality is so difficult, you must understand your biology. When you perceive a threat, whether it's a physical predator or a passive-aggressive email from your boss, your brain's amygdala triggers the fight, flight, or freeze response. In an instant, your body diverts resources. Blood is pulled away from your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic, long-term planning, and complex problem-solving, and sent to your large muscle groups. Your brain is literally making you stupid so that you can be fast. In the wild, this saved your life. In the modern boardroom or in a high-stakes personal conflict, it ruins your life. When you are emotionally hijacked, you lose the ability to see nuances. You see things in black and white. You say things you regret. You make impulsive decisions that destroy years of hard work. The person who breaks is the person who allows their biology to dictate their biography. The unbreakable mindset practices tactical calm. They recognize the biological surge, the sweaty palms, the racing heart, and they treat it as background noise. They refuse to let the noise reach the steering wheel of their mind. The cool head in the crisis. Think of a trauma surgeon in an emergency room. A patient is wheeled in with multiple life-threatening injuries. There is blood, there is noise, and there is a ticking clock. If that surgeon allowed themselves to feel sad for the patient or panicked about the clock, they would make a mistake. A millimeter of error in a state of panic is the difference between life and death. The surgeon operates in a state of emotional neutrality. They see the blood not as a tragedy, but as a technical problem to be solved. They see the clock not as a threat, but as a data point. By staying steady, they remain effective. We see this same trait in elite pilots. Consider the miracle on the Hudson. When Captain Chesley Sully Sullenberger lost both engines over New York City, he didn't scream, he didn't pray out loud, and he didn't lament his luck. If you listen to the cockpit voice recordings, his voice is eerily flat. He is communicating in short, declarative sentences. "We're gonna be in the Hudson," he said. He wasn't being brave in the traditional sense. He was being neutral. He understood that every ounce of energy spent on emotion was an ounce of energy taken away from flying the plane. In your life, when your engines fail, your primary job is to fly the plane. You cannot afford the luxury of an emotional breakdown until the wheels are stopped and the passengers are safe. Stay steady so you can stay effective. Neutrality in human conflict. Emotional neutrality is perhaps most powerful in interpersonal conflict. Imagine someone is yelling at you. They are insulting your character, mocking your work, and trying to provoke a reaction. The natural response is to defend yourself, to get angry, to yell back, to win the argument. But the moment you do that, you have lost. You have given them control over your state of mind. You have broken. The unbreakable person views an angry person the way a scientist views a chemical reaction. They observe. They don't absorb. They think, that person is out of control. They are projecting their internal pain. What is the most effective way for me to handle this? By staying neutral, you maintain the high ground. You see the gaps in their argument. You see what they are actually afraid of. You become the alpha in the room, not through aggression, but through an unshakable composure that makes their anger look small and ridiculous. The 5-second pause. How do you develop this? It begins with the gap. Between the stimulus, the thing that happens, and the response, what you do, there is a space. In that space lies your freedom. The average person has a very small gap. They react almost instantly. The unbreakable person has trained themselves to widen that gap. When the pressure hits, you must implement the 5-second pause. Acknowledge the surge. I feel my heart racing. I am angry or scared. Naming the emotion reduces its power. Breathe. 1 deep, diaphragmatic breath. This signals your nervous system to move from sympathetic, stress, to parasympathetic, calm. Audit the fact. Ask, what is the objective reality here, stripped of my interpretation? Choose the effective path. What action serves my long-term goal? This pause is the difference between a leader and a victim. It is the training ground for neutrality. The contagion of calm. There is another reason why emotional neutrality is vital. Calm is contagious. If you are a parent, a manager, or a leader of any kind, people are looking at you to decide how they should feel. If you panic, the group panics. If you remain neutral, the group settles. In a crisis, the most unbreakable person in the room becomes the de facto leader. People naturally gravitate toward the person who isn't screaming. By maintaining your own neutrality, you provide a psychological anchor for everyone else. You stabilize the environment. You become the eye of the storm. Stay steady so you can stay effective. Practical application. The neutrality drills. You cannot learn neutrality in a crisis any more than you can learn to swim in a shipwreck. You must practice in the shallows of your daily life. The traffic drill. When someone cuts you off, notice the surge of anger. Do not honk. Do not swear. Simply watch the emotion rise and fall like a wave. Maintain a neutral expression. The criticism drill. When you receive negative feedback, wait 10 minutes before responding. During those 10 minutes, try to find the data in the criticism and discard the insult. The cold plunge mentality. Expose yourself to minor physical discomfort, cold showers, hard sprints. Practice keeping your face relaxed and your breathing steady while your body is screaming for relief. Language check. Remove catastrophic language from your vocabulary. Stop saying this is a disaster, this is a nightmare, or I can't believe this. Use neutral language. This is a new development, this is a challenge, or this is a problem to be solved. The power of the poker face. There is a reason the world's best poker players are impossible to read. They know that information is the most valuable currency in the game. If they show excitement, they lose. If they show fear, they lose. Life is a high-stakes game. When you reveal your emotional volatility, you are giving away your power. You are showing the world exactly where your breaking point is. But when you move with emotional neutrality, you are an enigma. You are a black box that the world cannot figure out how to crack. You will feel the heat. You will feel the weight. But you will not show the strain. You will stay steady, not because you are unfeeling, but because you are focused. You have work to do, and you know that the only way to do it is with a clear mind and a steady hand. Stay steady so you can stay effective. Chapter 8. Turn setbacks into identity builders. The scar tissue of the soul. In the medical world, there is a fascinating biological process that occurs after an injury. When a bone is broken, the body doesn't just knit the pieces back together to their original state. It floods the area with minerals, creating a callus that is often denser and stronger than the surrounding bone. When skin is deeply cut, it heals as scar tissue, a tougher, more fibrous material designed to withstand future friction. Nature is telling us something profound. The system is designed not just to survive damage, but to be upgraded by it. In the psychological realm, however, most people operate in the opposite direction. When they face a setback, a failed business, a public rejection, a divorce, or a massive professional error, they treat the event as a subtraction. They feel as though a piece of their worth has been carved away. They look at the break and see it as proof of their inadequacy. They tell themselves, "I failed because I am not enough." The person who never breaks has performed a radical flip in perspective. They don't see setbacks as proof of inadequacy. They see them as identity builders. They realize that you cannot call yourself unbreakable if you have never been tested. You cannot claim to have grit if you have never been in the dirt. Every hit you take is not a reason to stop. It is the very thing that makes you harder to stop. Every hit makes you harder to stop. Beyond resilience, the anti-fragile mind. The philosopher Nassim Taleb introduced the concept of antifragility. He argued that we often confuse resilience with something much more powerful. Resilience is like a plastic cup. If you drop it, it doesn't break, but it doesn't get better either. It simply resists the shock. But antifragility is like a hydra from Greek mythology. Every time you cut off one head, two more grow in its place. The hydra needs the attack to become more dangerous. To be unbreakable, you must move beyond being a plastic cup and become the hydra. You must develop a mindset that says, "I am the type of person who gets stronger when things go wrong." Think about the most respected people in any field. We don't respect them because they had a smooth, easy path to the top. We respect them because of the hits they took along the way. We admire the founder who was fired from their own company and came back to build a titan. We admire the athlete who tore their ACL and returned to win the championship. Their setbacks didn't diminish their identity. Their setbacks defined their identity. The failure became the origin story of their strength. The verdict versus the stress test. The reason setbacks break most people is that they interpret failure as a verdict. They believe that the world has sat in judgment of them and found them wanting. But the unbreakable person interprets failure as a stress test. If you are building a bridge, you don't wait for it to be finished and then hope for the best. You subject the materials to extreme pressure in a lab. You bend the steel until it snaps so you know exactly where the limit is. When the steel snaps, the engineer doesn't cry. They don't feel like a failure. They say, "Excellent. Now I know where the weakness is. Now I can build a bridge that can handle twice that load." Your setbacks are your laboratory. Every time you fail, you are being given a high-resolution map of your current limitations. You are being shown exactly where your discipline is soft, where your strategy is flawed, or where your ego is getting in the way. By using the setback as an identity builder, you stop being afraid of the hit. You start to see the hit as a necessary part of the manufacturing process. You are being forged, and the forge requires heat, and it requires the hammer. Every hit makes you harder to stop. Case study: the architecture of failure. Consider the story of Abraham Lincoln. To the history books, he is the great emancipator, the man who saved the Union. But to his contemporaries for much of his life, he was a man defined by setbacks. He failed in business. He lost his seat in the state legislature. He lost his sweetheart to an untimely death. He had a nervous breakdown. He ran for Congress and lost. He ran for the Senate and lost. He ran for vice president and lost. If Lincoln had viewed these as a verdict, he would have retired to a quiet life of obscurity. But he used each failure as a layer of psychological armor. By the time the Civil War broke out, the greatest crisis in American history, Lincoln was the only man who couldn't be broken by the weight of the casualties or the vitriol of his enemies. Why? Because he had already survived everything else. He knew he could handle the hit because he had been hit 1,000 times before. His setbacks didn't just precede his success, they enabled it. They built the man who could handle the pressure of the presidency, turning rejection into leverage. For the Unbreakable, rejection is the ultimate identity builder. Most people take rejection personally. When they hear no, they shrink. But high performers use rejection as a refiner's fire. Think of J.K. Rowling, who was living on welfare when she sent the manuscript for Harry Potter to 12 different publishers. All 12 rejected it. She didn't think, I'm a bad writer. She thought, these 12 people haven't seen the vision yet. The rejections became the proof of her own conviction. By the time the 13th publisher said yes, she was a woman who knew she couldn't be stopped by the opinions of others. When you use setbacks to build your identity, you develop a secret resume. Your public resume shows your titles and your wins. Your secret resume shows your bankruptcies, your rejections, and your near misses. The person with the longest secret resume is usually the most dangerous person in the room. They have battle-hardened confidence. They aren't confident because they think they will win. They are confident because they know they can survive losing. That is a level of power that a winner who has never lost can never understand. Every hit makes you harder to stop. How to conduct a failure post-mortem. To turn a setback into an identity builder, you must change your after-action ritual. Most people either ignore their failures and thus learn nothing, or obsess over them and thus destroy their confidence. The Unbreakable use the failure post-mortem. Detach from the ego. Look at the failure as if it happened to someone else. Remove the I from the equation. It's not I failed, it's this strategy resulted in this outcome. Extract the mineral. Every failure is a rock that contains a mineral of truth. What is the one thing this setback taught you that a success never could have? Update the self-image. This is the most important step. You must consciously say to yourself, I am now the person who has survived X. This makes me more capable than I was yesterday. Increase the load. Immediately after a setback, find a way to get back into the arena. Don't give your brain time to calcify around the fear. The strength of the second wind. There is a phenomenon in long-distance running called the second wind. It is that moment when you feel you have nothing left, when your lungs are screaming and your legs are heavy, and you feel like you are about to break. But if you keep pushing through that wall, something miraculous happens. The pain recedes. Your breathing evens out. A new reservoir of energy opens up. Setbacks in life are the first wind dying out. They are the moment where your initial excitement and easy progress hit the wall. The person who breaks thinks the wall is the end. The person who never breaks knows that the wall is the gateway to the second wind. They know that on the other side of this setback is a version of themselves that is faster, stronger, and more efficient. They don't just endure the hit. They crave the hit because they know what it produces. Living with the hit. From this day forward, when you face a setback, I want you to smile. When you lose the client, when the investment goes to zero, when the relationship ends, or when you make a fool of yourself, take a breath and realize what is happening. You are being upgraded. You are being given the opportunity to prove that you are not a fair-weather success. You are being given the callus that will protect you from even greater pressures in the future. The world will try to tell you that your setbacks define your limits. You must tell the world that your setbacks define your legend. Every scar you have is a medal. Every failure is a piece of armor. Every no is a brick in the fortress of your identity. You are not the person who never falls. You are the person who is made of the very material that gets harder every time it hits the ground. Every hit makes you harder to stop. Chapter 9. Protect your focus like it's your future. The silent destroyer. We often imagine that breaking is a loud, dramatic event. We think of the athlete collapsing on the track, the business owner declaring bankruptcy in a courtroom, or the leader shouting in a moment of panic. But the reality is that most people don't break all at once. They break in slow motion, through 1,000 tiny concessions of their attention. Distraction is the silent destroyer of resilience. It is a slow leak in the pressurized cabin of your soul. If you allow your focus to be fragmented, you are not just losing time, you are losing the very mental architecture required to endure hardship. In the modern world, your attention is the most valuable currency you possess. It is also the most hunted. Billion-dollar industries are dedicated to one single goal: hijacking your focus for 30 seconds at a time. They want you in a state of constant, shallow reactivity. They want you clicking, scrolling, and reacting to things that do not matter, because a distracted mind is a profitable mind for them, but a weak mind for you. To become unbreakable, you must treat your focus as if it were your future. Because, in a very literal sense, it is. Where attention goes, strength grows. The physics of focus, laser versus flashlight. Think about light. A 100-watt light bulb in your living room provides enough illumination to read a book, but it is harmless. It is diffused. The energy is spread out across a wide area. It provides comfort, but it has no power. Now, take that same amount of energy, the same 100 watts, and concentrate it into a beam that is a fraction of a millimeter wide. You no longer have a light bulb. You have a laser. That laser can cut through steel. It can perform delicate eye surgery. It can destroy targets from miles away. The only difference is focus. Most people live their lives as flashlights. They are interested in everything and committed to nothing. Their attention is spread across 40 browser tabs, 5 social media platforms, a dozen half-finished projects, and the latest political drama. They are wide, but they are thin. Because their energy is so diffused, they have no cutting power. When they hit a wall, they cannot cut through it. They bounce off and look for something easier. The unbreakable person is a laser. They understand that resilience is a product of concentrated force. When you lock your focus onto a single objective and you refuse to let it go, you develop a psychological momentum that is almost impossible to stop. The myth of multitasking. One of the greatest lies of the 21st century is that multitasking is a skill. It is not. It is a form of cognitive suicide. Research shows that when you switch from one task to another, say, from writing a report to checking a quick text message, your brain does not switch immediately. A part of your attention stays stuck on the previous task. This is called attention residue. It can take up to 20 minutes for your brain to fully re-engage with the original task after a single distraction. If you are multitasking all day, you are living in a permanent state of cognitive debris. You are never operating at 100% capacity. This makes you fragile. Why? Because resilience requires deep work. It requires the ability to stay with a problem long after others have grown bored or tired. If you have trained your brain to seek a dopamine hit from your phone every 6 minutes, you will not have the mental stamina to endure a 3-year business turnaround or a 6-month recovery from injury. You have atrophied your focus muscle. To be unbreakable, you must be able to sit with a single thought, a single problem, and a single effort until it is solved. You must reclaim the intellectual property of your own mind. Where attention goes, strength grows. Protecting the perimeter. In military strategy, you don't just protect the center of the base, you protect the perimeter. You set up sensors, fences, and guards miles away from the target so that you have time to react when an enemy approaches. You must do the same with your focus. You cannot wait until you are in the zone to protect your attention. By then, it's too late. You must design a perimeter of protection around your mind. This means being ruthlessly selective about what you let into your consciousness. Most people are information gluttons. They consume news they can't use, opinions that don't matter, and drama that isn't theirs. They think they are being informed, but they are actually being infected. Every piece of useless information you consume is a weight you have to carry. It creates mental noise that makes it harder to hear your own intuition when things get tough. The unbreakable person has a low information diet. They don't check the news 10 times a day. They don't follow people who make them angry or insecure. They realize that their focus is a sacred space. If a piece of information doesn't help them grow, solve a problem, or serve their mission, it is denied entry. Case study: the monk mode of the greats. Look at the most prolific people in history. From Bill Gates and his think weeks in a secluded cabin, to Carl Jung and his stone tower at Bollingen, to elite athletes who vanish into training camps, they all understand the necessity of isolation. They don't do this to be antisocial. They do it because they know that deep progress requires the elimination of noise. When you are in a high-pressure phase of your life, you must be willing to go into your own version of monk mode. This is not about hiding, it is about concentrating. It is about saying no to 1,000 good things so that you can say yes to the one great thing. The world will try to guilt you for this. People will call you obsessed, unavailable, or too serious. Let them. Their opinion is part of the noise you are filtering out. Resilience is the ability to maintain your focus on your purpose while the world tries to pull you into its distractions. Where attention goes, strength grows. Focus as a form of resilience. Why does focus make you harder to break? Because it provides clarity. When you are clear on your why and your how, setbacks become manageable. They are simply variables in the equation. But when you are unfocused, every setback feels like a catastrophe. You don't have enough mental bandwidth to process the failure and find a solution, because your bandwidth is being used up by irrelevant nonsense. A focused person is like a ship with a clear destination and a locked rudder. It can take heavy waves and still stay on course. An unfocused person is a ship with no destination and a swinging rudder. A single wave can capsize it because it has no momentum. Focus creates the mental toughness that allows you to endure the boring parts of success. Most people quit not because they hit a massive wall, but because they got bored. They got distracted by a new idea or a new trend. They broke because they couldn't stay focused on the mundane discipline required for mastery. Practical application. The attention fortress. To live this chapter, you must stop being a victim of your environment and start being the architect of it. The morning ritual of silence. Do not check your phone for the first hour of the day. The morning is when your focus is at its most potent. Do not give the first fruits of your mind to a social media algorithm. Use that hour for your hardest, most important task. The kill switch for notifications. Turn off every notification on your phone that isn't from a real human being. You are not a lab rat waiting for a bell to ring. You decide when you check your messages. They do not decide when to interrupt you. The one task rule. For the next 7 days, practice deep work sessions. Set a timer for 60 minutes. In that hour, you do one thing and one thing only. No browser tabs, no music with lyrics, no quick checks of email. If you feel the urge to switch, notice it, and return to the work. Audit your entourage. Focus is contagious. If you spend time with people who are constantly distracted and reactive, you will become the same. Spend time with people who have the long view, who talk about ideas rather than people, and who have the discipline to stay on a single path. Your attention is your life. At the end of your life will be nothing more than the sum total of what you paid attention to. If you paid attention to petty arguments, celebrity gossip, and your own insecurities, you will have lived a small, fragile life. But if you paid attention to your craft, your family, your growth, and your mission, you will have lived a grand, unbreakable life. Every time you pull your focus away from a distraction and return it to your work, you are performing a rep for your soul. You are building the muscle of attention. You are telling yourself, I am the master of my mind, and I am the owner of my future. Stop leaking your power. Close the tabs. Put down the phone. Look at the task in front of you and don't look away until it's finished. Where attention goes, strength grows. Chapter 10. Live as the person who can handle anything. The completion of the architecture. We have traveled through the forge. We have dismantled the habit of quitting, reframed the sensation of pain, built standards that tower over feelings, and burned the courtroom of self-negotiation. We have automated our discipline, detached from the scoreboard, and armored our minds with emotional neutrality. We have turned our scars into identity builders and our focus into a fortress. But now, we reach the most critical stage of the journey. A collection of techniques is not enough. A toolkit, no matter how advanced, is useless if the person holding it does not believe in their own hands. The final step in becoming unbreakable is the total integration of these principles into a single, unified self-image. It is the shift from doing these things to being the person for whom these things are natural. You must stop trying to be resilient and start living as the person who is simply, fundamentally, and irrevocably capable of handling anything the universe throws your way. I handle what arrives. The sovereignty of responsibility. The foundation of the unbreakable self-image is the acceptance of 100% responsibility for your life. Most people operate in a state of deferred power. They believe that their happiness, their success, and their stability are dependent on external factors: the economy, their upbringing, their boss, their spouse, or the political climate. When things go wrong, they look for a reason outside of themselves. To the average person, this feels like self-defense. They think, if it's not my fault, I don't have to feel bad. But in reality, this is the ultimate form of fragility. If you give the world the credit for your success, you must give the world the power to break you. If your stability is built on good conditions, you will crumble the moment the conditions change. The unbreakable person practices radical sovereignty. They assume that everything, even the things they didn't cause, is their responsibility to handle. If a storm destroys your house, it isn't your fault, but it is your responsibility. You can spend years complaining about the wind, or you can spend your energy rebuilding the foundation. The second you blame an external force, you have admitted that the force is stronger than you. The second you take responsibility, you have reclaimed your power. The unbreakable self says, I may not control what happens, but I'm the absolute master of what happens next. I handle what arrives. The self-image of capability. Your life will never consistently exceed the image you have of yourself in your own mind. If you see yourself as someone who tries their best but usually struggles, your brain will find ways to manifest that struggle. But if you see yourself as a capable actor, someone who possesses a high degree of agency and competence, your brain will find ways to manifest solutions. This is not positive thinking in the superficial sense. This is not about standing in front of a mirror and saying, I am a millionaire when you are broke. That is a lie, and your subconscious knows it. The self-image of capability is built on evidence. Every time you upheld a standard when you felt like quitting, you were collecting evidence. Every time you stayed neutral under pressure, you were collecting evidence. Every time you chose the process over the outcome, you were collecting evidence. Now, you must look at that mountain of evidence and draw a conclusion. The conclusion is not I am perfect. The conclusion is, I am someone who can handle difficulty. I am someone who doesn't break. I am someone who finds a way. When you walk into a room, you shouldn't walk in hoping people like you or hoping things go well. You should walk in with the quiet, internal certainty that no matter what the room contains, be it an angry audience, a complex problem, or a massive opportunity, you are the person who can process it, adapt to it, and master it. The behavioral cues of the unbreakable. Your mind follows your body just as much as your body follows your mind. To live as the person who can handle anything, you must adopt the physicality of resilience. Watch the body language of someone who is breaking. Their shoulders slump, their head drops, their breath becomes shallow, and their movements become frantic or lethargic. They are physically broadcasting their defeat to their own nervous system. The unbreakable person uses behavioral cues to reinforce their identity. The posture of power. Even when you feel tired, you stand tall. You keep your chin level and your shoulders back. You tell your brain, through your spine, that you are not under threat. The rhythm of calm. You speak slightly slower. You move with intention. You refuse to be rushed by the chaos of others. The direct gaze. You look challenges in the eye. When a problem arises, you don't look away or hide. You look directly at it, assessing its dimensions with clinical neutrality. By acting like the person who can handle anything, you eventually become that person. The act creates the fact. I handle what arrives. Practical visualization, the pre-mortem of the soul. Most people use visualization to imagine their dream life, the beach, the house, the trophy. While this can be motivating, It does nothing to build resilience. In fact, it can make you more fragile because it makes the actual life feel more disappointing by comparison. The unbreakable person uses functional visualization. They don't just visualize the win, they visualize the work. Every morning, take 3 minutes to visualize the challenges you might face that day. Don't imagine yourself avoiding them. Imagine yourself handling them. Visualize yourself getting the bad news and staying neutral. Visualize yourself feeling exhausted and choosing to stick to your standard anyway. Visualize yourself being insulted and choosing not to negotiate with your ego. By rehearsing the resilience, you are pre-wiring your brain for the event. When the crisis actually occurs, your brain doesn't panic. It says, "Oh, I remember this. We've already been here. We know what to do." This is what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It is not pessimistic. It is the ultimate form of preparation. You are not hoping for a sunny day. You are making yourself rainproof. The final shift, from why me to for me. The final transformation of the unbreakable mindset is the total elimination of the victim narrative. The victim asks, "Why is this happening to me?" The unbreakable asks, "How is this happening for me?" This is the ultimate reframing. It is the belief that every obstacle is a custom-designed training module intended to make you exactly who you need to be. The difficult boss is there to teach you emotional neutrality. The financial setback is there to teach you resourcefulness. The personal loss is there to teach you the value of the present and the depth of your own soul. When you believe that the world is working for you, especially when it's hitting you, you become impossible to defeat. You stop resisting the struggle and you start using the struggle. You become anti-fragile. You realize that the very things that break others are the things that are building you. I handle what arrives. The conclusion of the audiobook, the new identity. As this audiobook comes to an end, the person who began chapter 1 no longer exists. That person was someone who relied on motivation. That person was someone who negotiated with their alarm clock. That person was someone who looked at the scoreboard and trembled. You are now the person who has decided that quitting is not on the menu. You are the person who views pain as progress. You are the person who lives by standards, not feelings. You are the person who executes without debate. You are the person whose default setting is discipline. You are the person who detaches from the outcome to focus on the effort. You are the person who stays steady in the fog of war. You are the person who uses hits to build armor. You are the person who protects their focus like their future. You are unbreakable. The world is a chaotic, unpredictable, and often difficult place. It will continue to throw storms your way. It will continue to test your joints and pressure your foundations. But the storm is no longer your enemy. The storm is your gym. You don't need to know what tomorrow holds. You don't need to know if the market will go up or down, or if the plan will work or fail. All you need to know is that you are the person who will be there, standing in the middle of it all, with a steady hand and a clear mind. When the world asks, "Can you handle this?" you don't answer with words. You answer with your life. Take a breath. Stand tall. Look at the horizon. I handle what arrives. End of chapter 10. Closing credits. This concludes the audiobook of The Mindset of Those Who Never Break. Thank you for listening. Now, go out and execute.